So spoke Aeneas, weeping, and gave the ships their head, and at long last they glided to land at the Euboean colony of Cumae. The prows were turned out to sea, the teeth of the anchors held, and they moored with their curved sterns fringing the shore. Gleaming in the sun, an eager band of warriors rushed out onto the shore of the land of Hesperia, some searching for the seeds of flame hidden in the veins of flint, some raiding the dense woods, the haunts of wild beasts, and pointing the way to rivers they had found. But the devout Aeneas made for the citadel, where Apollo sits throned on high, and for the vast cave standing there apart, the retreat of the awesome Sibyl, into whom Delian Apollo, the god of prophecy, breathes mind and spirit as he reveals to her the fortune. They were soon coming up into the grove of Diana Trivia and Apollo's golden shrine. They say that when Daedalus was fleeing from the kingdom of Minos, he dared to trust his life to the sky, floating off on swiftly driving wings towards the cold stars of the north, the greater and lesser bears, by a route no man had ever gone before, until at last he was hovering lightly in the air above the citadel of the Chalcidian Cumae. Here he first returned to earth, dedicating to Phoebus Apollo the wings that had oared him through the sky, and founding a huge temple. On its doors were depicted the death of Androgeus, son of Minos, and then the Athenians, the descendants of Cecrops, ordered to pay a cruel penalty and yield up each year the living bodies of 7 of their sons. The lots are drawn, and there stands the urn. Answering this on the other door are Knossos and the land of Crete, rising from the sea. Here can be seen the loving of the savage bull, and Pasiphae, laid out to receive it and deceive her husband Minos. Here too is the hybrid offspring, the Minotaur, half man and half animal, the memorial to a perverted love. And here is its home, built with such great labour, the inextricable labyrinth. But Daedalus takes pity on the great love of the princess Ariadne, and unravels the winding paths of his own baffling maze, guiding the blind steps of Theseus with a thread. You too, Icarus, would have taken no small place in this great work had the grief of Daedalus allowed it. Twice your father tried to shape your fall in gold, and twice his hands fell helpless. The Trojans would have gone on gazing and read the whole story through, but Anchises, who had been sent ahead, now returned, bringing with him Diphobe, the daughter of Glaucus, priestess of Phoebus and Trivia, who spoke these words to the king. This is no time for you to be looking at sights like these. Rather, at this moment you should be sacrificing 7 bullocks from a herd the yoke has never touched, and 7 yearling sheep as ritual prescribes. So she addressed Aeneas, nor were the Trojans slow to obey, and when the sacrifices were performed, she called them into the lofty temple. This rocky citadel had been colonized by Chalcidians from Euboea, and one side of it had been hollowed out to form a vast cavern into which led 100 broad shafts, 100 mouths, from which streamed as many voices, giving the responses of Sibyl. They had reached the threshold of the cavern when the virgin priestess cried, "Now is the time to ask your destinies. It is the god is here." And that moment, as she spoke in front of the doors, her face was transfigured, her colour changed, her hair fell in disorder about her head, and she stood there with heaving breast and her wild heart bursting in ecstasy. She seemed to grow in stature and speak as no mortal had ever spoken when the god came to her in his power and breathed upon her. "Why are you hesitating, Trojan Aeneas?" she cried. "Why are you so slow to offer your vows and prayers? Until you have prayed, the great mouths of my house are dumb and will not open." She spoke and said no more. A cold shiver ran through the very bones of the Trojans, and their king poured out the prayers from the depths of his heart. Phoebus Apollo, you have always pitied the cruel sufferings of the Trojans. You guided the hands of Trojan Paris and the arrow he sent into the body of Achilles. You were my leader as I set out upon all the oceans that lap the great lands of the earth and reached the far-flung peoples of Massilia and the fields that lie out to sea in front of the Syrtes. Now at long last we lay hold upon the shores of Italy that have so often receded before us. I pray that from this moment the fortunes of Troy may follow us no further. You too, you gods and goddesses who could not endure Troy and the great glory of the race of Dardanus, it is now right that you should have mercy upon the people of Pergamum. And you, O most holy priestess, you who know in advance what is to be, grant my prayer, for the kingdom I ask for is no more than what is owed to me by the fates. And allow the Trojans and their homeless and harried gods to settle in Latium. Then I shall found a temple of solid marble to Phoebus and Trivia, and holy days in the name of Phoebus. And for you too there will be a great shrine in our kingdom. Here I shall establish your oracle and the riddling prophecies you have given to my people. And I shall dedicate chosen priests to your gracious service. Only do not consign your prophecies to leaves to be confused and mocked by every wind that blows. Sing them in your own voice, I beg of you. He said no more, but the priestess, not yet submissive, was still in wild frenzy in her cave. The more she tried to shake her body free of the great god, the harder he strained upon her foaming mouth, taming that wild heart and moulding her by his pressure. And now the 100 huge doors of her house opened of their own accord and gave her answers to the winds. At long last you have done with the perils of the ocean, but worse things remain for you to bear on land. The sons of Dardanus shall come into their kingdom in Lavinium. Put that fear out of your mind. But it is a coming they will wish they had never known. I see wars, deadly wars. I see the Thybris foaming with torrents of blood. There you will find a Simois and a Xanthus. There too will be a Greek camp. A second Achilles is already born in Latium, and he too is the son of a goddess. Juno too is part of Trojan destiny, and will never be far away when you are suppliant, begging in dire need among all the peoples and all the cities of Italy. Once again, the cause of all this Trojan suffering will be a foreign bride, another marriage with a stranger. You must not give way to these adversities, but must face them all the more boldly wherever your fortune allows it. Your road to safety, strange as it may seem, will start from a Greek city. With these words from her shrine, the Sibyl of Cumae sang her fearful riddling prophecies, her voice booming in the cave as she wrapped the truth in darkness, while Apollo shook the reins upon her in her frenzy and dug the spurs into her flanks. The madness passed, the wild words died upon her lips, and the hero Aeneas began to speak. O virgin princess, suffering cannot come to me in any new or unforeseen form. I have already known it. Deep in my heart I have lived it all before. One prayer I have. Since they say the gate of the king of the underworld is here, and here too in the darkness is the swamp which the tide of Acheron floods. I pray to be allowed to go and look upon the face of my dear father. Show me the way and open the sacred doors for me. On these shoulders I carried him away from the flames and a hail of weapons, and rescued him from the middle of his enemies. He came on my journey with me all over the oceans and endured all the threats of sea and sky, feeble as he was, but finding a strength beyond his years. Besides, it was my father himself who begged and commanded me to come to you as a suppliant and approach your doors. Pity the Father, O gracious one, and pity the Son, I beg of you. All things are within your power, and Hecate had her purpose in giving you charge of the grove of Avernus. Was not Orpheus allowed to summon the shade of his wife with the sound of the strings of his Thracian lyre? And since Pollux was allowed to redeem his brother by sharing his death, does he not often travel that road and often return? Do I need to speak of Theseus or the great Hercules? I too am descended from highest Jupiter. While he was still speaking these words of prayer with his hand upon the altar, the prophetess began her answer. Trojan, son of Anchises, sprung from the blood of the gods, it is easy to go down to the underworld. The door of black Dis stands open night and day, but to retrace your steps and escape to the upper air, that is the task, that is the labour. Some few have succeeded, sons of the gods, loved and favoured by Jupiter, or raised to the heavens by the flame of their own virtue. The middle of that world is filled with woods, and the river Cocytus glides round them, holding them in its dark embrace. But if your desire is so great, if you have so much longing to sail twice upon the pools of Styx, and twice to see black Tartarus, if it is your pleasure to indulge this labour of madness, listen to what must first be done. Hidden in a dark tree there is a golden bough. Golden are its leaves and its pliant stem, and it is sacred to Proserpina, the Juno of the underworld. A whole grove conceals it, and the shades of a dark, encircling valley close it in. But no man may enter the hidden place of the earth before plucking the golden foliage and fruit from this tree. The beautiful Proserpina has ordained that this is the offering that must be brought to her. When one golden branch has been torn from that tree, another comes to take its place, and the stem puts forth leaves of the same metal. So then, lift up your eyes and look for it, and when in due time you find it, take it in your hand and pluck it. If you are a man called by the fates, it will come easily of its own accord. But if not, no strength will prevail against it, and hard steel will not be able to hack it off. Besides, you have a friend lying dead. Of this you know nothing, but his body is polluting the whole fleet, while you linger here at our door asking for oracles. First you must carry him to his place of rest, and lay him in a tomb. Then you must bring black cattle to begin the purification. When all this is done, you will be able to see the groves of Styx, and the kingdom where no living man may set his foot. So she spoke, and no other word would cross her lips. With downcast eyes and sorrowing face, Aeneas walked from the cave, revolving in his mind the fulfillment of these dark prophecies. With him, stride for stride, went faithful Anchises. and his heart was no less heavy. Long did they talk, and many different thoughts they shared. Who was this dead comrade of whom the priestess spoke? Whose body was this that had to be buried? And when they came to the shore, there above the tide, they found the body of Micenas, who had died a death he had not deserved. Micenas, son of Aeolus, who had no equal summoning the troops with his trumpet and kindling the god of war with his music. He had been the comrade of great Hector, and by Hector's side had borne the brunt of battle, excelling not only with the trumpet but also with the spear. But after Achilles had defeated Hector and taken his life, the brave Micenas had found no less a hero to follow by joining Aeneas of the stock of Dardanus. Then one day in his folly he happened to be blowing into a seashell, sending the sound ringing over the waves, and challenged the gods to play as well as he. At this his rival Triton, if the tale is to be believed, had caught him up and drowned him in the surf among the rocks. So then they raised round his body a loud noise of lamentation, not least the dutiful Aeneas. Without delay they hastened, still weeping, to obey the commands of Sibyl, gathering trees to build an altar which would be his tomb, and striving to raise it to the skies. Into the ancient forest they went, among the deep layers of wild beasts. Down came pines. The ilex rang under the axe. Beams of ash and oak were split along the grain with wedges, and they rolled great manna ashes down from the mountains. Aeneas took the lead in all this work, urging on his comrades and carrying at his side the same tools as they. But he was always gloomily turning one thought over in his mind as he looked at the measureless forest, and he chanced to utter it in his prayer. If only that golden bough would now show itself to us in this great grove, since everything the priestess said about Micenas has proved only too true. No sooner had he spoken than 2 doves chanced to come flying down out of the sky and settle there on the grass in front of him. Then the great Aeneas knew they were his mother's birds, and he was glad. "Be my guides," he prayed, "if there is a way, and direct your swift flight through the air into the grove where the rich branch shades from fertile soil. And you, goddess, my mother, do not fail me in my time of uncertainty." So he spoke, and waited to see what signs they would give, and in what direction they would move. They flew and fed and flew again, always keeping in sight of those who followed. Then, when they came to the evil-smelling throat of the Avernus, first they soared, and then they swooped down through the clear air, and settled where Aeneas had prayed they would settle, on the top of the tree that was 2 trees, from whose green there gleamed the breath of gold along the branch, just as the mistletoe, not sown by the tree on which it grows, puts out fresh foliage in the woods in the cold of winter, and twines its yellow fruit round slender tree trunks. So shone the golden foliage of the dark ilex, so rustled the golden foil in the gentle breeze. Aeneas seized the branch instantly. It resisted, but he broke it off impatiently and carried it to the house of the priestess, the Sibyl. All this time the Trojans on the shore did not cease to weep for Micenas, and pay their last tributes to his ungrateful ashes. First they built a huge pyre with rich pine torches and oak logs, and wove dark-leaved branches into its sides, setting up funeral cypresses in front of it, and crowning it with his shining armour. Some prepared hot water in cauldrons, and when it was seething over the flames, they washed and anointed the cold body and raised their lament. When they had wept their fill, they placed him on a bier and draped him in his familiar purple robes. Others then performed the sad duty of carrying the bier, and held their torches to the bottom of the pyre with averted faces, after the practice of their ancestors. Then all the heaped up offerings burned, the incense, the sacrificial food, the bowls filled with oil. After the embers had collapsed and the flames died down, they washed with wine the thirsty ashes that were all that remained of him. And Aeneas collected his bones and sealed them in a bronze casket. 3 times he carried them in solemn ritual round the comrades of Micenas, and sprinkled the heroes lightly with pure water from the branch of a fruitful olive tree, uttering words of farewell as he performed the lustration. But dutiful Aeneas raised a great mound as a tomb and set it on the hero's arms. The oars he rowed with, and the trumpet he had blown, there near the airy top of Mount Micenas, which bears his name now and forever through all the years to come. As soon as this was done, he hastened to carry out the commands of the Sibyl. There was a huge, deep cave with jagged pebbles underfoot, and a gaping mouth guarded by dark woods and the black waters of a lake. No bird could wing its flight over this cave and live, so deadly was the breath that streamed out of that black throat and up into the vault of heaven. Hence the Greek name Aeneas, the place without birds. Here, first of all, the priestess stood 4 black-backed bullocks and poured wine upon their foreheads. She then plucked the bristles from the beak of their foreheads, between their horns, to lay upon the altar fires as a first offering, and lifted up her voice to call on Hecate, mighty in the sky and mighty in Erebus. Attendants put the knife to the throat and caught the warm blood in bowls. Aeneas himself took his sword and sacrificed a black-fleeced lamb to Night, the mother of the Furies, and her sister Earth, and to Proserpina a barren cow. Then he set up a night altar for the worship of the Stygian king. 1 second. You can come out, but you're going to have to shut up. Then he set up a night altar for the worship of the Stygian king, and laid whole carcasses of bulls on its flames, and poured rich oil on the burning entrails. Then suddenly, just before the sun had crossed his threshold in the sky and begun to rise, the earth bellowed underfoot, the wooded ridges quaked, and dogs could be heard howling in the darkness. It was the arrival of the goddess. "Stand apart, all you who are unsanctified," cried the priestess. "Stand well apart. The whole grove must be free of your presence. You, Aeneas, must enter upon your journey. Draw your sword from the sheath. Now you need your courage. Now let your heart be strong." With these words she moved in a trance into the open cave, and step for step Aeneas strode fearlessly along behind her. "You gods who rule the world of the spirits, you silent shades, and chaos and phlegethon, you dark and silent wastes. Let it be right for me to tell what I have been told. Let it be with your divine blessing that I reveal what is hidden deep in the mists beneath the earth." They walked in the darkness of that lonely night, with shadows all about them, through the empty halls of Dis and his desolate kingdom, as men walk in a wood by the sinister light of a fitful moon, when Jupiter has buried the sky in shade and black night has robbed all things of their colour. Before the entrance hall of Orcus, in the very throat of hell, grief and revenge have made their beds, and old age lives there in despair, with white-faced diseases and fear and hunger, corrupter of men, and squalid poverty, things dreadful to look upon, and death and drudgery besides. Then there is sleep, death's sister, perverted pleasures, murderous war astride the threshold, the iron chambers of the Furies, and raving discord with blood-soaked ribbons binding her viperous hair. In the middle, a huge dark elm spreads out its ancient arms, the resting place, so they say, of flocks of idle dreams, one clinging under every leaf. Here too are all manner of monstrous beasts, centaurs stabling inside the gate, Scyllas, half dogs, half women, Briareus with his 100 heads, the Hydra of Lerna hissing fiercely, the Chimera armed in fire, Gorgons and Harpies, and the triple phantom of Geryon. Now Aeneas drew his sword in sudden alarm to meet them, with naked steel as they came at him, and if his wise companion had not warned him that this was the fluttering of disembodied spirits, a mere semblance of living substance, he would have rushed upon them and parted empty shadows with steel. Here begins the road that leads to the rolling waters of Acheron, the river of Tartarus. Here is a vast quagmire of boiling whirlpools which belches sand and slime into Cocytus. And these are the rivers and waters guarded by the terrible Charon in his filthy rags. On his chin there grows a thick grey beard, never trimmed. His glaring eyes are lit with fire, and a foul cloak hangs from a knot at his shoulder. With his own hands he plies the pole, and sees to the sails as he ferries the dead in a boat the colour of burnt iron. He is no longer young, but, being a god, enjoys rude strength and green old age. The whole throng of the dead were rushing to this part of the bank, mothers, men, great-hearted heroes whose lives were ended, boys, unmarried girls, and young men laid on the pyre before the faces of their parents, as many as there are the leaves that fall in the forest at the first chill of autumn, as many as the birds that flock to land from deep ocean when the cold season of the year drives them over the sea to lands bathed in sun. There they stood, begging to be allowed to be the first to cross, and stretching out their arms in longing for the further shore. But the grim boatman takes some here and some there, and others he pushes away far back from the sandy shore. Really? I see. Aeneas, amazed and distressed by all this tumult, cried out, "Tell me, virgin priestess, what is the meaning of this crowding to the river? What do the spirits want? Why are some pushed away from the bank while others sweep the livid water with their oars?" The aged Sibyl made this brief reply. "Son of Anchises, beyond all doubt the offspring of the god, what you are seeing is the deep pools of the Cocytus and the swamp of the Styx, by whose divine power the gods are afraid to swear and lie. The throng you see on this side are the helpless souls of the unburied. The ferryman there is Charon. Those sailing the waters of the Styx have all been buried. No man may be ferried from fearful bank to fearful bank of this roaring current until his bones are laid to rest. Instead they wander for 100 years, fluttering round these shores, until they are at last allowed to return to the pools they have so longed for." The son of Anchises checked his stride and stood stock still, with many thoughts coursing through his mind as he pitied their cruel fate. When there among the sufferers, lacking all honour in death, he caught sight of Leucaspis and Orontes, the captain of the Lycian fleet, men who had started with him from Troy, sailed the wind-torn seas, and been overwhelmed by gales from the south that rolled them in the ocean, ships and crews. Next he saw coming towards him his helmsman, Palinurus, who had fallen from the ship's stern. No, he was pushed, and plunged into the sea while watching the stars on the recent crossing from Libya. Aeneas recognized this sorrowing figure with difficulty in the dark shadow, and was the first to speak. What god was it, Palinurus, that took you from us and drowned you in mid-ocean? Come, tell me, for this is the one response of Apollo that has misled me. I have never found him false before. He prophesied that you would be safe upon the sea and would reach the boundaries of Ausonia. Is this how he has kept his promise? "Oh, great leader, son of Anchises," replied Palinurus, "the bowl on the tripod of Apollo has not deceived you, and no god drowned me in the sea. While I was holding course and gripping the tiller, which it was my charge to guard, it was broken off by some mighty force, and I dragged it down with me as I fell. I swear by the wild sea that I felt no fear for myself to equal my fear that your ship might come to grief, stripped of its steering, and with its pilot pitched into the sea, and that great swell rising. 3 long winter nights the wind blew hard from the south and carried me over seas that I could not measure, till, when the light came on the 4th day and a wave lifted me to its crest, I could just make out the land of Italy. I swam slowly to shore and was on the point of reaching safety when a tribe of ruffians set upon me with their knives. Weighed down as I was by my wet clothes and clinging by my fingertips to the jagged rocks at the foot of a cliff, knowing nothing of me, they made me their plunder. And now I am at the mercy of the winds, and the waves are turning my body over at the water's edge. But I beg of you, by the joyous light and winds of heaven, by your father, by your hopes of Iulus as he grows to manhood, you who have never known defeat, rescue me from this anguish. Either throw some earth on my body, you can do that, just steer back to the harbours of Velia, or else if there is a way and the goddess who gave you life shows it to you, for I do not believe you are preparing to sail these great rivers and the swamp of the Styx unless the blessing of the gods is with you. Take pity on me, give me your right hand, take me aboard and carry me with you over the waves, so that in death at least I can be at peace in a place of quiet." These were the words of Palinurus, and this was the reply of the Sibyl. "How did you conceive this monstrous desire, Palinurus? How can you, who are unburied, hope to set eyes on the river Styx and the pitiless waters of the Furies? How can you come near the bank unbidden? You must cease to hope that the fates of the gods can be altered by prayers. But hear my words, remember them, and find comfort for your sad case. The people who live far and wide in all their cities round this place where you died will be driven by signs from heaven to consecrate your bones. They will raise a burial mound for you, and to that mound will pay their annual tribute. And the place will bear the name of Palinurus for all time to come." At these words his sorrows were removed, and the grief was driven from that sad heart for a short time. He rejoiced in the land that was to bear his name. And so they carried on to the end of the road on which they had started, and at last came near the river. When the boatman, now in mid-stream, looked ashore from the waves of the Styx and saw them coming through the silent wood towards the bank, he called out and challenged them. "You there, whoever you are, making for our river with a sword by your side, come tell us why you are here. Speak to us from where you stand, take not another step. This place belongs to the shades, to sleep and to night, the bringer of sleep. Living bodies may not be carried on the boat that plies the Styx. It gave me little enough pleasure to take even Hercules aboard when he came, or Theseus, or Pirithous, although they said they were born of gods and their strength was irresistible. It was Hercules whose hand put chains on the watchdog of Tartarus and dragged him shivering from the very throne of our king. The others had taken it upon themselves to steal the queen, my mistress, from the chambers of Dis. The answer of the Amphrysian Sibyl was brief. Here there are no such designs. You have no need for alarm. These weapons of his bring no violence. Wowed Gaius. Seriously? The monstrous keeper of the gate can bark in his cave and frighten the bloodless shades till the end of time, and Proserpina can stay chaste behind her uncle's doors. Trojan Aeneas, famous for his devotion and his feats of arms, is going down to his father in the darkest depths of Erebus. If the sight of such devotion does not move you, then look at this branch, she said, showing the branch that had been hidden in her robes, and realize what it is. At this, the swelling anger subsided in his heart. No more words were needed. Seeing it again after a long age, and marvelling at the fateful branch, the holy offering, he turned his dark boat and steered towards the bank. He then drove off the souls who were on board with him, sitting all along the cross benches, and cleared the gangways. In the same moment he took the huge Aeneas into the hull of his little boat. Being only sewn together, it groaned under his weight, shipping great volumes of stagnant water through the seams. But in the end, it carried priestess and hero safely over, and landed them on the foul slime among the grey-green reeds. The kingdom on this side resounded with barking from the 3 throats of the huge monster Cerberus lying in a cave in front of them. When the priestess was close enough to see the snakes writhing on his neck, she threw him a honey cake steeped in soporific drugs. Wow. The dog. He opened his 3 jaws, each of them rabid with hunger, and snapped it up where it fell. The massive back relaxed, and he sprawled full length on the ground, filling his cave. The sentry now sunk in sleep, Aeneas leapt to take command of the entrance, and was soon free of the bank of that river which no man may recross. In that instant they heard voices, a great weeping and wailing of the souls of infants who had lost their share of the sweetness of life on its very threshold, torn from the breast on some black day and drowned in the bitterness of death. Next to them were those who had been condemned to death on false charges, but they did not receive their places without the casting of lots and the appointment of juries. Minos, the president of the court, shakes the lots in the urn, summoning the silent dead to act as jurymen, and holds inquiry into the lives of the accused and the charges against them. Next to them were those unhappy people who had raised their innocent hands against themselves, who had so loathed the light that they had thrown away their own lives. But now how could they wish to be under high heaven, enduring poverty and drudgery, however hard? That cannot be, for they are bound in coils of the hateful swamp of the waters of death, trapped in the ninefold windings of the river Styx. Not far from here could be seen what they call the mourning plains, stretching away in every direction. Here are the victims of unhappy love, consumed by that cruel wasting sickness, hidden in the lonely byways of an encircling wood of myrtle trees, and their suffering does not leave them, even in death. Here Aeneas saw Phaedra and Procris and Euryphile in tears as she displayed the wounds her cruel son had given her. Here he saw Evadne and Pasiphae with Laodamia walking by their side, and Caeneus, once a young man, but now a woman restored by destiny to her former shape. Wandering among them, in that great wood was Phoenician Dido with her wound still fresh. When the Trojan hero stopped beside her, recognizing her dim form in the darkness, like a man who sees or thinks he has seen the new moon rising through the clouds at the beginning of the month, in that instant he wept and spoke sweet words of love to her. So the news they brought me was true, unhappy Dido? They told me you were dead, and had ended your life with the sword. Alas, alas! Was I the cause of your dying? I swear by the stars, by the gods above, by whatever there is to swear by in the depth of the earth, it was against my will, Queen, that I left your shore. It was the stern authority of the commands of the gods that drove me on, as it drives me now through the shades of this dark night, in this foul and mouldering place. I could not have believed that my leaving would cause you such sorrow. Do not move away. Do not leave my sight. Who are you running from? Fate has decreed that I shall not speak to you again. With these words, Aeneas, shedding tears, tried to comfort that burning spirit. But grim-faced she kept her eyes upon the ground and did not look at him. Her features moved no more when he began to speak than if she had been a block of flint or Parian marble quarried on Mount Marpessus. Then at last she rushed away, hating him, into the shadows of the wood where Sychaeus, who had been her husband, answered her grief with grief and her love with love. Aeneas was no less stricken by the injustice of her fate, and long did he gaze after her with tears, pitying her as she went. From here they continued on their appointed road, and they were soon on the most distant of these fields, the place set apart for brave warriors. Here Tydeus came to meet him, and Parthenopaeus, famous for his feats of arms, and the pale phantom of Adrastus. Here he saw and groaned to see standing in their long ranks all the sons of Dardanus who had fallen in the battle, and been bitterly lamented in the upper world: Glaucus, Medon, and Thessalocus, the 3 sons of Antenor, and Polyboetes, the consecrated priest of Ceres, and Idaeus, still keeping hold of Priam's chariot, still keeping hold of his armour. The shades crowded round him on the right and on the left, and it was not enough just to see him. They wished to delay him, to walk with him, to learn the reasons for his coming. But when the Greek leaders and the soldiers of Agamemnon in their phalanxes saw the hero and his armour gleaming through the shadows, a wild panic seized them. Some turned and ran, as they had run once before to get back to their ships, while others lifted up their voices and raised a tiny cry, which started as a shout from mouth wide open, but no shout came. Here too he saw Deiphobus, son of Priam, his whole body mutilated and his face cruelly torn. The face and both hands were in shreds. The ears had been ripped from the head. He was noseless and hideous. Aeneas, barely recognizing him as he tried frantically to hide the fearsome punishment he had received, went up to him and spoke in the voice he knew so well. Deiphobus, mighty warrior, descended from the noble blood of Teucer, who could have wished to inflict such a punishment upon you? And who was able to do this? I was told that on that last night you wore yourself out killing the enemy and fell on a huge pile of Greek and Trojan dead. At that time I did all I could, raising an empty tomb for you on the shore of Cape Rutium, and lifting up my voice to call 3 times upon your shade. Your name and your arms mark the place, but you I could not find, my friend, to bury your body in our native land. as I was leaving it." To this the son of Priam answered, "You, my friend, have left nothing undone. You have paid all that is owed to Deiphobus and to his dead shade. It is my own destiny, and the crimes of the murderess from Sparta that have brought me to this. These are reminders of Helen. You know how we spent that last night in false joy. It is our lot to remember it only too well. When the horse that was the instrument of fate, heavy with the brood of armed men in its belly, leapt over the high walls of Pergamum, Helen was pretending to be worshipping Bacchus, leading the women of Phrygia round the city, dancing and shrieking their ritual cries. There she was in the middle of them, with a huge torch, signalling to the Greeks from the top of the citadel. And all the time I was sleeping soundly in our accursed bed, worn out by all I had suffered, and sunk in a sleep that was sweet and deep, and like the peace of death. Meanwhile, this excellent wife of mine, after moving all my armour out of the house, and taking the good sword from under my head, called in Menelaus and threw open the doors, hoping no doubt that her loving husband would take this as a great favour to wipe out the memory of her past sins. You can guess the rest. They burst into the room, taking with them the man who had incited them to their crimes, their comrade Ulysses. They say he is descended from Aeolus. You gods, if the punishment I ask is just, grant that a fate like mine should strike again, and strike Greeks. But come, it is now time for you to tell me what chance has brought you here alive. Is it your sea wanderings that have taken you here? Are you under the instruction of the gods? What fortune is dogging you that you should come here to our sad and sunless homes in this troubled place?" While they were speaking to one another, Dawn's rosy chariot had already run its heavenly course past the midpoint of the vault of the sky, and they might have spent all the allotted time in talking but for Aeneas's companion. The Sibyl gave her warning in few words. "Night is running quickly by, Aeneas, and we waste the hours in weeping. This is where the way divides. On the right, it leads up to the walls of great Dis. This is the road we take for Elysium. On the left is the road of punishment for evildoers, leading to Tartarus, the place of the damned." "There is no need for anger, great priestess," replied Deiphobus. "I shall go take my place among the dead and return to the darkness. Go, Aeneas, go, great glory of our Troy, and enjoy a better fate than mine." These were his only words, and as he spoke, he turned on his heel and strode away. Aeneas looked back suddenly and saw under a cliff on his left a broad city encircled by a triple wall and washed all round by Phlegethon, one of the rivers of Tartarus, a torrent of fire and flame, rolling and grinding great boulders in its current. There before him stood a huge gate with columns of solid adamant, so strong that neither the violence of men nor of the heavenly gods themselves could ever uproot them in war, and an iron tower rose into the air, where Tisiphone sat with her blood-soaked dress girt up, guarding the entrance, and never sleeping, night or day. They could hear the groans from the city, the cruel crack of the lash, the dragging and clanking of iron chains. Aeneas stood in terror, listening to the noise. What kinds of criminal are here? Tell me, virgin priestess, what punishments are inflicted on them? What is the wild lamentation in the air? The Sibyl replied, "Great leader of the Trojans, the chaste may not set foot upon the threshold of that evil place. But when Hecate put me in charge of the groves of Avernus, She herself explained the punishments the gods had imposed and showed me them all. Here, Rhadamanthus, king of Knossos, holds sway with his unbending laws, chastising men, hearing all the frauds they have practiced, and forcing them to confess the undiscovered crimes they have gloated over in the upper world. Foolishly, for they have only delayed the day of atonement till after death. Immediately the avenging Tisiphone leaps upon the guilty and flogs them till they writhe, waving fearful serpents over them in her left hand and calling up the cohorts of her savage sisters, the Furies. Then at last the gates sacred to the gods below shriek in their sockets and open wide. You see what a watch she keeps, sitting in the entrance. What a sight she is guarding the threshold. Inside, more savage still, the huge black-throated 50-headed Hydra has its lair. And then there is Tartarus itself, stretching sheer down into its dark chasm twice as far as we look up to the ethereal Olympus in the sky. Here, rolling in the bottom of the abyss, is the ancient brood of earth, the army of Titans, hurled down by the thunderbolt. Here too I saw the huge bodies of the twin sons of Aloeus, who laid violent hands on the immeasurable sky to wrench it from its place and tear down Jupiter from his heavenly kingdom. I saw too Salomonius suffering cruel punishment, still miming the flames of Jupiter and the rumblings of Olympus. He it was who, riding his 4-horse chariot and brandishing a torch, used to go in glory through the peoples of Greece and the city of Olympia in the heart of Elis, laying claim to divine honours for himself. Fool that he was to copy the storm and the inimitable thunderbolt with the rattle of the horn of his horse's hooves on bronze. Through the thick clouds the all-powerful Father hurled his lightning, no smoky light from pitchy torches for him, and sent him spinning deep into the abyss. Tityos, too, I could see, the nursling of earth, mother of all, his body sprawling over 9 whole acres, while a huge vulture with hooked beak cropped his immortal liver and the flesh that was such a rich supplier of punishment. Deep in his breast it roots and forages for its dinners, while the filaments of his liver know no rest but are restored as soon as they are consumed. I do not need to speak of the Lapiths of Ixion or Pirithous, over whose heads the boulder of black flint is always slipping, always seeming to be falling. The gold gleams on the high supports of festal couches, and a feast is laid in regal splendour before the eyes of the guilty. But the greatest of the Furies is reclining at table and allows no hand to touch the food, but leaps up brandishing a torch and shouting with a voice of thunder. Immured in this place and waiting for punishment are those who in life hated their brothers, beat their fathers, defrauded their dependents, found wealth and brooded over it alone, without setting aside a share for their kinsmen. These are most numerous of all, men caught and killed in adultery, men who took up arms against their own people and did not shrink from abusing their master's trust. Do not ask to know what their punishments are, what form of pain or what misfortune has engulfed them. Some are rolling huge rocks, or hanging, spread-eagled, on the spokes of wheels. Theseus is sitting there dejected, and there he will sit until the end of time, while Phlegias, most wretched of them all, shouts this lesson for all men at the top of his voice in the darkness. Learn to be just and not to slight the gods. You have been warned. Here is the man who has sold his native land for gold and set a tyrant over it, putting up tablets with new laws for a price, and for a price removing them. Here is the man who forced his way into his daughter's bed and a forbidden union. They have all dared to attempt some monstrous crime against the gods, and have succeeded in their attempt. If I had 100 tongues, 100 mouths, and a voice of iron, I could not encompass all their different crimes, or speak the names of all their different punishments. When the aged priest of Apollo had finished her answer, she added these words, "But come now, you must take the road and complete the task you have begun. Let us hasten. I can see the high walls forged in the furnaces of the Cyclops, and the gates there in front of us in the arch. This is where we have been told to lay the gift that is required of us." After these words, they walked the dark road together, soon covering the distance and coming close to the doors. There Aeneas leapt on the threshold, sprinkling his body with fresh water, and fixed the bow full in the doorway. When this rite was at last performed, and his duty to the goddess was done, they entered the land of joy, the lovely glades of the fortunate woods, and the home of the blessed. Here a broader sky clothes the plains in glowing light, and the spirits have their own sun and their own stars. Some take exercise on grassy wrestling grounds, and hold athletic contests and wrestling bouts on the golden sand. Others pound the earth with dancing feet and sing their songs, while Orpheus, the priest of Thrace, accompanies their measures on his 7-stringed lyre, plucking the notes sometimes with his fingers, sometimes with his ivory plectrum. Here was the ancient line of Teucer, the fairest of all families, great-hearted heroes born in a better time, Ilus, Assaracus, and Dardanus, the founder of Troy. Aeneas admired from a distance their army and empty chariots. Their swords were planted in the ground, and their horses wandered free on the plain cropping the grass. Reposing there below the earth, they took the same joy in their chariots and their armour as when alive, and the same care to feed their sleek horses. Then suddenly he saw others on both sides of him, feasting on the grass, singing in a joyful choir their paean to Apollo all through the grove of fragrant laurels, where the mighty river Eridanus rolls through the forest to the upper world. Here were armies of men bearing wounds received while fighting for their native land, priests who had been chased unto death, and true prophets whose words were worthy of Apollo. Then those who have raised human life to new heights by the skills they have discovered, and those whom men remember for what they have done for men. All these, with sacred ribbons of white round their foreheads, gathered round Aeneas and the Sibyl, and she addressed these words to them, especially to Mucius, for the whole great throng looked up to him as he stood there in the middle, head and shoulders above them all. Tell me, blessed spirits, and you, best of poets, which part of this world holds Anchises? Where is he to be found? It is because of Anchises that we have come here and crossed the great rivers of Erebus. The hero returned a short answer. None of us has a fixed home. We live in these densely wooded groves, the rest on the soft couches of the river bank and in the fresh water meadows. But if that is the desire of your hearts, come climb this ridge, and I shall soon set you on an easy path. So saying, he walked out in front of them to a place from where they could see the plains below, bathed in light, and from that point Aeneas and the Sibyl came down from the mountain tops. Father Anchises was deep in a green valley, walking among the souls who were enclosed there, and eagerly surveying them as they waited to rise into the upper light. It so happened that at that moment he was counting the number of his people, reviewing his dear descendants, their fates and their fortunes, their characters and their courage in war. When he saw Aeneas coming towards him over the grass, he stretched out both hands in eager welcome, with the tears streaming down his cheeks, and these were the words that broke from his mouth. "You have come at last," he cried. "I knew your devotion would prevail over all the rigour of the journey and bring you to your father. Am I allowed to look upon your face, my son, to hear the voice I know so well and answer it with my own? I never doubted it. I counted the hours knowing you would come, and my love has not deceived me. I understand how many lands you have travelled, and how many seas you have sailed to come to me here. I know the dangers that have beset you. I so feared the kingdom of Libya would do you harm." "It was my vision of you," replied Aeneas, "always before my eyes and always stricken with sorrow, that drove me to the threshold of this place. The fleet is moored in the Tyrrhenian Sea. Nope, it's that word again. I hate that word. The fleet is moored in the Tyrrhenian. The fleet is moored in the Tyrrhenian. Tyrrhenian. The fleet is moored in the Tyrrhenian Sea, on the shores of Italy. Give me your right hand, father. Give it to me. Do not avoid my embrace." As he spoke these words, his cheeks were washed with tears, and 3 times he tried to put his arms around his father's neck. 3 times the phantom melted in his hands, as weightless as the wind, as light as the flight of sleep. And now Aeneas saw in a side valley a secluded grove with copses of rustling trees, where the river Leith glided along past peaceful dwelling houses. Around it fluttered numberless races and tribes of men, like bees in a meadow on a clear summer day, settling on all the many-coloured flowers, and crowding around the gleaming white lilies, while the whole plain is loud with their buzzing. Not understanding what he saw, Aeneas shuddered at the sudden sight of them, and asked why this was. What was that river in the distance, and who were all those companies of men crowding its banks? "These are the souls to whom fate owes a second body," replied Anchises. "They come to the waves of the river Leith, and drink the waters of serenity and draughts of long oblivion. I have long been eager to tell you who they are, to show them to you face to face, and count the generations of my people to you, so that you could rejoice the more with me at the finding of Italy. But are we to believe," replied Aeneas to his dear father, "that there are some souls who rise from here and go back under the sky and return to sluggish bodies? Why do the poor wretches have this terrible longing for the light?" "I shall tell you, my son, and leave you no longer in doubt," replied Anchises. And he began to explain all things in due order. In the beginning, Spirit fed all things from within, the sky and the earth, the level waters, the shining globe of the moon, and the Titan star, the sun. It was mind that set all this matter in motion. Infused through all the limbs, it mingled with that great body, and from the union there sprang families of men and of animals, the living things of the air and the strange creatures born beneath the marble surface of the sea. The living force within them is of fire, and its seeds have their source in heaven, but their guilt-ridden bodies make them slow, and they are dulled by earthly limbs and dying flesh. It is this that gives them their fears and desires, their griefs and joys. Closed in the blind darkness of this prison, they do not see out to the winds of air. Even when life leaves them on their last day of light, they are not wholly freed from all the many ills and miseries of the body, which must harden in them over the long years and become ingrained in ways we cannot understand. And so they are put to punishment, to pay the penalty for all their ancient sins. Some are stretched and hung out empty to dry in the winds. Some have the stain of evil washed out of them under a vast tide of water, or scorched out by fire. Each of us suffers his own fate in the afterlife. From here we are sent over the broad plains of Elysium, and some few of us possess these fields of joy until the circle of time is completed, and the length of days has removed ingrained corruption and left us pure ethereal sense, the fire of elemental air. All these others whom you see, when they have rolled the wheel for 1,000 years, are called out by God to come in great columns to the river of Lethe, so that they may duly go back and see the vault of heaven again, remembering nothing, and begin to be willing to return to bodies. When he had finished speaking, Anchises led his son and the Sibyl with him into the middle of this noisy crowd of souls, and took up his stance on a mound from which he could pick them all out as they came towards him in a long line, and recognized their faces as they came. Come now, I shall tell you of the glory that lies in store for the sons of Dardanus, for the men of Italian stock, who will be our descendants, bright spirits that will inherit our name, and I shall reveal to you your destiny. That young warrior you see there, leaning on the sword of valour, to him is allotted the place nearest to the light in this grove, and he will be the first of us to rise into the ethereal air with an admixture of Italic blood. He will be called Silvius, an Alban name, and he will be your son, born after your death. You will live long, but he will be born too late for you to know, and your wife Lavinia will rear him in the woods to be a king and father of kings, and found our dynasty to rule in Alba Longa. Next to him is Procas, glory of the Trojan race, and Capys and Numitor, and the king who will renew your name, Silvius Aeneas, your equal in piety and in arms if ever he succeeds to his rightful throne in Alba. What warriors they are! Look at the strength of them. Look at the oak wreaths, the civic crowns that shade their foreheads. These are the men who will build Nomentum for you, and Gabii, and the city of Fidene. They will set Colatia's citadel on the mountains, and Pometia too, and Castrum Inui, and Bola and Cora. These, my son, will be the names of places which are at this moment places without names. And Romulus, son of Mars, will march at his grandfather's side. He will be of the stock of Assaracus, and his mother, who will rear him, will be Ilia. Do you see how the double crest stands on his head, and the father of the gods himself already honours him with his own emblem? Look at him, my son. Under his auspices will be founded Rome in all her glory, whose empire shall cover the earth, and whose spirit shall rise to the heights of Olympus. Her single city will enclose 7 citadels within its walls, and she will be blessed in the abundance of her sons, like Sibyl, the mother goddess of Mount Beresintus, riding in her chariot, turret-crowned, through the cities of Phrygia, rejoicing in her divine offspring and embracing 100 descendants, all of them gods, all dwellers in the heights of heaven. Now turn your 2 eyes in this direction and look at this family of yours, your own Romans. Here is Caesar, and all the sons of Iulus, about to come under the great vault of the sky. Here is the man whose coming you so often hear prophesied. Here he is, Augustus Caesar, propaganda again, son of a god, the man who will bring back the golden years to the fields of Latium, once ruled over by Saturn, and extend Rome's empire beyond the Indians and the Garamantes, to a land beyond the stars, beyond the yearly path of the sun, where Atlas holds on his shoulder the sky all studded with burning stars, and turns on its axis. The kingdoms round the Caspian Sea and Lake Meotis are even now quaking at the prophecies of his coming. The 7 mouths of the Nile are in turmoil and alarm. Hercules himself did not make his way to so many lands, though his arrow pierced the hind with hooves of bronze, though he gave peace to the woods of Erymanthus and made Lerna tremble at his bow. Nor did triumphing Bacchus ride so far when he drove his tiger-drawn chariot down from the high peak of Nysa, and the reins that guided the yoke were the tendrils of the vine. And do we still hesitate to extend our courage by our actions? Does any fear deter us from taking our stand on the shore of Ausonia? But who is this at a distance, resplendent in his crown of olive and carrying holy emblems? I know that white hair and beard. This is the man who will first found our city on laws, the Roman king called from the little town of Cures, in the poor land of the Sabines, into a mighty empire. Hard on his heels will come Tullus, to shatter the leisure of his native land and rouse to battle men that have settled into idleness and armies that have lost the habit of triumph. Next to him, and more boastful, comes Anchises, too fond even now of the breath of popular favour. Do you wish to see how the Tarquin kings, the proud spirit of avenging Brutus, and the rods of office he will retrieve? He will be the first to be given authority as consul, and the stern axis of that office. When his sons raise again the standard of war, it is their own father that will call them to account in glorious name of liberty. He is not favoured by fortune, however future ages may judge these actions. Love of his country will prevail with him, and his limitless desire for glory. Look too at the Decii and the Drusai over there, and cruel Torquatus with his axe, and Camillus carrying back the standards. Those 2 spirits you see gleaming there in their well-matched armour are in harmony now, while they are buried in night. But if once they reach the light of life, what a terrible war they will stir up between them, what battles, what carnage when the father-in-law swoops from the ramparts of the Alps and his citadel of Monaco, and his son-in-law leads against him the embattled armies of the East. Oh, my sons, do not harden your hearts to such wars. Do not turn your strong hands against the flesh of your motherland. You who are sprung from Olympus, you must be the first to show clemency. Throw down your weapons. O blood of my blood, here is the man who will triumph over Corinth, slaughtering the men of Achaia, and will ride his chariot in triumph to the hill of the Capitol. Here is the man who will raze Argos and Agamemnon's Mycenae to the ground, and will kill Perseus the Aeacid, descendant of the mighty warrior Achilles, avenging his Trojan ancestors and the violation of the shrine of Minerva. Who would leave you unmentioned, great Cato? or you, Cossus, who would be without the Gracchi, or the two Scipios, both of them thunderbolts of war and the bane of Libya, or Fabricius, who will find power in poverty, or you, Serranus, sowing your seed in the furrow? Where are you rushing that weary spirit along to, you Fabii? You there are the great Fabius Maximus, the one man who restores the state by delaying. Others, I do not doubt it, will beat bronze into figures that breathe more softly. Others will draw living likenesses out of marble. Others will plead cases better or describe with their rod the courses of the stars across the sky and predict their risings. Your task, Roman, and do not forget it, will be to govern the peoples of the world in your empire. These will be your arts, and to impose a settled pattern upon peace, to pardon the defeated and war down the proud. Aeneas and the Sibyl wondered at what they had heard, and Father Anchises continued, Look there at Marcellus marching in glory, in spoils torn from the enemy commander he will fight and defeat. There he is, victorious and towering above all others. This is the man who will ride into battle and quell a great uprising, steadying the ranks of Rome and laying low the Carthaginian and the rebellious Gaul. He will be the third to dedicate the supreme spoils to Father Quirinus. At this Aeneas addressed his father, for he saw marching with Marcellus a young man, noble in appearance and in gleaming armour, but his brow was dark and his eyes downcast. Who is that, father, marching at the side of Marcellus? Is it one of his sons, or one of the great line of his descendants? What a stir his escort makes, and himself what a presence! But round his head there hovers a shadow dark as night. Then Father Anchises began to speak through tears. Oh, my son, do not ask. This is the greatest grief that you and yours will ever suffer. Fate will just show him to the earth, no more. The gods in heaven have judged that the Roman race would become too powerful if this gift were theirs to keep. What a noise of the mourning of men will come from the field of Mars to Mars's great city. What a cortege will Tiber see as he glides past the new mausoleum on his shore. No son of Troy will ever so raise the hopes of his Latin ancestors, nor will the land of Romulus so pride itself on any of its young. Alas for his goodness, alas for his old-fashioned truthfulness, and that right hand undefeated in war. No enemies could ever have come against him in war and lived. Whether he was armed to fight on foot, or spurring the flanks of his foaming war-horse. Oh, the pity of it! If only you could break the harsh laws of fate. You will be Marcellus, give lilies from full hands, leave me to scatter red roses. These at least I can heap up for the spirit of my descendant, and perform the rite, although it will achieve nothing. So they did wander all over the broad fields of air, and saw all there was to see. And after Anchises had shown each and every sight to his son, and kindled in his mind a love for the glory that was to come, he told them then of the wars he would in due course have to fight, and of the Laurentine peoples, of the city of Latinus, and how he could avoid or endure all the trials that lay before him. There are two gates of sleep. One is called the Gate of Horn, and it is an exit for true shades. The other is made all in gleaming white ivory, but through it the powers of the underworld send false dreams up towards the heavens. There on that night did Anchises walk with his son and with the Sibyl, and spoke such words to them as he sent them on their journey through the gate of ivory. Aeneas made his way back to his ships and his comrades, then steered a straight course to the harbour of Caieta. The anchors were thrown from the prows, and the ships stood along the shore.